Hello and welcome to another episode of our new ICMA education and training series, Let's Talk Markets, and today we will talk repo and collateral, which is obviously one of the key pillars of our work here at ICMA. I'm Alex Westphal. I'm a Senior Director here in our London office in the Market Practice and Regulatory Policy team. And I'm also coordinating our repo and collateral work, including as secretary to our European Repo and Collateral Council, the ERCC, which has always been very much at the heart of what we do in relation to repo and collateral. And as we just celebrated the 25 years of the ERCC with a very nice dinner reception here in London, we thought this is a nice opportunity to just reflect a bit on the first quarter century with the ERCC and to look ahead. And who better to do that than the two guests we have with us today, Richard Comotto and Godfried DeVits, both senior advisors to the ERCC, among many other roles, and of course two of the key figures in the ERCC over the years. So Godfried, let's start with you. You've obviously been on board since the very beginning and indeed have been very instrumental to the creation of the ERCC. So can you just tell us a bit about the early days of the ERCC and how the idea was born?
Well, it's actually a long-lasting story, because in the early 90s, the central banks in Europe decided to use repo as the instrument for monetary policy implementation. And so we had France and Belgium the first. The UK was actually the very last of the whole countries here in Europe. And so we had the CRD reporting group in ICMA at the time. And so Catherine Fitzmaurice from Citi chaired this, and it was mainly American banks who met every 6 weeks here in London. And one day I got my wind of this and I went to this meeting, and then I said, why don't you come one of the next meetings to Brussels? So they came to Brussels. We had the auditorium from the bank. We of course had this true Belgians nice lunch or dinner, I can't remember. And so they had elections for chairman, and I was chairman, and I didn't even know I was standing. So I had to go to my boss and say, well, you're going to have to help me, and no problem, go ahead. So that was the European Repo Council. We had to go through the legal service, the handbook, the Rule 1000, that's so famous now. So that's how it started. It also, of course, was a beginning for the preparations for the euro introduction in the financial markets, and that was instrumental. So then I was called one Monday morning from my desk by Peter Praat, who then became at the end in the ECB Governing Council, to say there's a group meeting in the Commission, and it's about repo, be downstairs, the taxi will be there, and we're going to the Commission. And it was called the Giovannini Group. I never heard about it. Of course, Alberto Giovannini, who in the meantime passed away, was instrumental in looking with the Commission at what do we need to do for fixed income, ICMA's bread and butter, and the repo markets. That's where it came from. And then we had many meetings and sesame and so on. And so basically, the other thing, particularly where I became in with collateral, was the ECB eligibility. And we discussed that then in Frankfurt, what should be in, what should be out. And we all know the stories, Greece out, Greece in, all government bonds, but then corporate bonds, then also, of course, the bank loans, the credit claims, we call them, which were very instrumental in the crisis, or helping the crisis of 2012 and so on. So that was where it really started, and where we, particularly me being the true European, wanted it to be in every country. So we had people from Italy, from Spain, and we kind of created this momentum much more and more, with the help from Richard, of course, who was always there for the academic stuff that I don't really like, that's too much work for me. So Richard, thank you very much for being there as well.
But of course, the ERCC is still very much alive and kicking today. So Godfried, what do you think, what were kind of, if you look back then, today, what are the key differences? What has changed, and perhaps also what has remained the same?
The first thing was that, and Richard will comment on that, on data, right? Nobody knew actually what the market represented. So that's I leave that to him. But also education, right? And so we were instrumental with, there was a book first, The Ultimate Guide of Repo from 1999. I couldn't find a copy in my cupboard, but then I found this one, Collateral Security Lending, Repo and OTC, and that was published in 2007. And that helped kind of awareness of what we do as repo market and how it went for. Now the composition of the committee has changed because every year we have elections. I want to keep people awake. You don't come 3 times, you're out. You can be substituted once. But we also have seen females coming into it now, buy side, but also the infrastructure, the ATSs, and so the composition has changed to the point that I feel as a dinosaur getting very old, and then I have young guys who just get married, just had their first baby, so it's a living committee, right? And it's a lot of friendship as well. I think we saw that in the anniversary dinner. It's really a community that helps the wider role of repo to be understood by, and we come back to that, regulators, legislators, Joe Public even, right? Because in Italy, the repo market is very much known by the individuals who buy BTPs, which could be good and could be bad in the long term.
Thanks, Godfried. Richard, Godfried mentioned already your crucial role. So when did you enter the repo community and when?
So I got involved with the creation of the ICMA survey, and the committee, the ERCC, or ERC as it was then, wanted somebody who wasn't in ICMA, who preferably from an academic background. And the idea was that I was the only person who would ever see the data. So it was all kept very confidential. Everybody was absolutely paranoid about the secrecy of the data. So we started this, we produced the form, got the committee to accept it, and then started to push it out. And it's gone from there. We've done it every year, every 6 months since 2001. It's the longest continuous survey of the repo market anywhere. It's got progressively more detailed. I have to say, it's a huge effort on behalf of many banks. Yes, that's why I started.
And you mentioned already, of course, the repo survey, the European Repo Survey remains one of our flagship publications. So if I can ask you to pick just maybe 3 long-term trends that you've seen in the data, because we have now, as you said, this really nice time series. What would that be?
I suppose number one would be the growth, the secular growth in the market. We, of course, have the interruption during the global crisis, 2008, but the market's bounced back. It was held down for a number of years by increasing regulation in response to the crisis, that people had to absorb that regulation. And then more recently, there's a change in the composition because of QE by central banks, which makes collateral scarce. But growth has been resumed for the last few years. And so really it's an upward trend all the way. So that's quite dramatic. When we started, everybody used to say the repo market was $1 billion, €1 billion, and that number was just repeated. We're up to almost 11 trillion now, and that's just the sample of 60 banks that we have. The second thing I would say would be diversification. It would have been years ago, if you go back and take the currencies in the euro, it would have been predominantly those in sterling. We now have a very large dollar sector, very large yen sector. There are other OECD currencies there. The same for collateral. So it's a much more international market. And then the third, I would say, was what's called electronification these days. We started the survey just as the first automatic trading systems, people like Broker Tech, were starting. MTS about the same time, or moving into out of Italy at that time, and CCPs. And they're very much, there's a synergistic relationship between the automatic systems and CCPs, and we picked that up. And I would say that was also one of the defining characteristics. More recently, that's changed character. We're seeing D2C platforms with automated trading filling in some of the gaps.
But it's funny when you mentioned this growth, there was always something bothering me. We were actually accused of manipulating, over trading, abusing the whole monetary fiscal framework. And that's why in education, I wanted, this publication that I mentioned earlier, but also we wanted to do more. And in anticipating your next question, if I may, that's why we should do a repo seminar, professional repo, by the traders for the community. And that's being the privilege of chairman, I asked my bank, General Bank in Brussels, that doesn't exist anymore, to host it. And we were really shocked, 285 people turned up. Can you imagine? The first time we did this, it was good because it helped the footprint for the future education from ICMA.
And it was supposed to be for new dealers, but we've always had quite senior people there as well, and more than just dealers. But on that front, the first education we ever did was actually on the GMRA. So I asked the question, why doesn't the ICMA do a GMRA course? And there's no good answer to that except, yeah, let's do one. So we started that, and I think that was the first education that's been done on a regular basis.
So those are then, I mean, obviously the professional repo course, we continue to do that. It will happen in July here in London, so that will be a nice opportunity for everyone. But of course we have the courses as well, and you mentioned the GMRA courses. So that was really, when was that, the beginning?
I think we started that before the global financial crisis. You know, I can't really remember, but it's been a long time. Yeah, and that's an interesting course because it's very interactive. We have quite a mix. It's supposed to be for lawyers and documentary staff, but we get everybody there, and that's one of the great things. Yeah.
And let's perhaps come on then to a very related topic, which is market practice, which has also always been very much at the center of what we do.
It's funny, when I looked at this book to prepare this, I saw that in April 2004, I wrote a small letter to all active repo participants, confirmation of second leg of buy-sell-back transactions. So you can imagine this was, discussed that, if you do a trade, you should confirm buy and sell side or sell and buy side the same moment. And we have learned now through CSDR and all the other work we do, that it's important to see if it's a repo or a cash purchase or sale. So in 2004 already we had these kind of discussions on market practice, and this continued. And at one stage the committee was so overwhelmed by clearing and settlement issues, legal documentation, that we have created different groups now. So we have one on electronic fintech, we have CSDR, SFTR, ATS guidelines we came out very recently. So there's so much to do, so much to organize that the committee overlooks everything, but we have those side tracks which are really helpful. And the market best practice, how many pages do we have now?
I think we must be coming on for 200 soon, wasn't we? Yeah.
And it's been used, no?
Oh, very much. It was strange because the first few years, didn't seem to be any interest in it at all. And we kept plugging away, and then suddenly people started to take interest. I think one of the defining moments was somebody came and said, oh, it's great, I show it to my customers and it solves arguments. And it was having that authoritative statement, this is how business is best done. It's just saved a lot of time and effort, which was the intention. It's now the most complete, comprehensive and authoritative market guidance, I think, of any market.
Definitely, yeah. No, thanks, Richard. Godfried, you mentioned already the kind of the education of the public sector, so regulators, and how often the repo market is somewhat misunderstood. So how do you see the role of the ERCC in this context?
I call it influencing the regulatory environment, but the very broad one, right? From central banks to legislators, regulators, markets practice committees from the Bank of England and so, because I think it's good when they who create regulation understand what we're doing, it's a much easier way of pushing. Now, one of the things that I believe is missing is that they really refrain from hiring dinosaurs, not myself or Richard, but others who actually have done this work with their staffing, with the administration, that they get it, the finer points. And it makes a lot of effort, and as far as now the recent example, to explain to European parliamentarians even, this is why we do this, For instance, reuse was a huge debate, and at the end I went to the parliament and I gave €50 and it went around the room and everybody thought with cash you can do this, but not with collateral. One story there was, I missed my €50 at the end, somebody put it in his pocket. So this was quite funny, but it makes it visual for people, the importance of this market, which is basically the foundations of financial markets.
Yeah, and which we continue to do very actively. both from here and in Brussels, where you're based. Okay, good. Perhaps let's also come on then to the global dimension of our work. We recently launched our new Global Repo and Collateral Forum, which is something that never really existed, but it's of course nothing new that what we do is of very global nature and relevance. Probably the best sign or evidence for that is the GMRA, the Global Master Repurchase Agreement, which has become the main master agreement for repo transactions worldwide. And by the way, we just celebrated last year the 30th anniversary of the GMRA, so another
We didn't have a dinner, did we?
We didn't have a dinner. We should probably do that, yeah, given the success. But that's of course another thing, another important priority for us. But also we've played a very active role in market development and helping developing or new and emerging markets to develop their repo market. And you've been, Richard, particularly active in that. So
yeah.
Can you just explain a little bit your involvement, but also the importance of education in that context?
So I do work in various emerging markets for ICMA, for the IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and so on. And it's an interesting light on the repo market here because you have to go back to basics. And what strikes you is the fact that there's very little, apart from what the ICMA produce, very little material people can look at. It's one of the largest financial markets in the world. The literature is paper thin, and I think our repo FAQs on the ICMA website are the most looked at page. So we go to these markets, and I always ask the question, obvious questions: do you trade cash? And very often the answer is no. Next question: do you have any collateral? Obviously, sometimes the answer is no. Third, can you actually give collateral by selling it? And again, the answer is often no. So you face a fundamental problem. This is a slow process, and when you advise countries with the legal question, for example, what you have to say is, okay, you're going to have to change the law, and you can have to change bankruptcy law. Now, this is politically ultra sensitive because it can be seen to be disadvantaging other creditors. And then with collateral, you're saying, well, the government needs to reform the way it issues debt. Very sensitive issue, and you eventually get to the point where you say you can't just simply go to Parliament or the legislators and say we need a law allowing repo, because it sounds so arcane, so esoteric. Whereas what you've got to say is we need an active liquid government bond market that provides cheap funding for the development of the economy. Okay, and repo is an important component of that. And I think what I've learned is that's not just something I have to say to people in emerging markets who are trying to create a repo market. It's a lesson, well, basically what you're talking about. People don't appreciate the pivotal role of repo because we tend to start at the technical end rather than the goals we're seeking to achieve. And you'll never interest a politician or a civil servant in outside the finance ministry in repo. But if you say to them, well, you can have a much more efficient economy and finance development more efficiency, that sounds different. So that's what we do. We're at the end of the day doing the same in emerging markets as we are back in developed markets. But it's going to take a long, long time. There are probably 40, 50, perhaps 60 functioning repo markets around the world. We won't see that number increase rapidly. It's going to be 1 or 2 every few years. It'll then accelerate. Everybody's heading that way.
Well, we're working on it.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, let me ask a final question, really also looking a bit ahead. Now we look back at 25 years. Let's look a little bit ahead. So what do you see as the key topics that will keep us busy over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Okay, I thought about this when we prepared today. We need to bridge a gap between trading, liquidity and collateral, and the true settlement finality. So we need to do education, digging into legacy system, bring digitalization, common domain model, tokenization. Basically, we have to mind the gap and fill the gap, right? Being in London, that's quite appropriate. But I also believe that repo connects all products. Repo connects the whole financial system. And then when you see that FSB is now consulting on non-banks and collateral use in June this year, we're really behind the curve, right? So we have to fill this gap, because this is, I think, far too late to think about it. You kill the banks and then you say, oh, it's all gone to the buy side. Of course, water goes where it's the lowest common ground, right? And that's the same for repo. You've got to be ahead of the developments when you introduce new regulation. And I think that's where we have to work more.
I would hark back to skill and education. I think there is rapid turnover in the market, new generations coming in, people moving jobs, and there's a constant need to provide that background. I'm really worried about the thinness of personnel at trading and management level. Juniorization has been a notable theme. And what's referred to as market hysteresis, lack of experience. In the US, that's been a major issue in things like the SVB crisis. And I think we really need to continue to pump out information on what a repo is, what it does, how important it is. I think that's critical. I also, and I have to declare an interest here, I also think we're in the age of data. And the repo market, there's a paucity of it. If you are a member of an electronic trading system, you have a particular view, you have price data, volume data, but we're supposed to be in data-driven markets now, and the repo market lacks that. There is a huge pool of it that regulators collect, and we never see ever again, and I think the market has to get together, and as I say, I have an interest in this, to reuse this data, because we are inevitably in the age of automation. And you can't, the age of AI, it's defined by data. So I think that's going to dominate every discussion.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for today. That's a nice concluding themes. Clearly a lot of work for us to do. So let's get back to work. And thank you everyone for listening.